Hello, and welcome to the fourth program in the Total Transformation series. Our physical health, our mental health, and our spiritual health can affect the quality of life that we all lead. And we've seen each evening as the presenters have given us some information, some informative indicators in each of these areas. And tonight, I'm sure our presenters will share some more helpful ideas. Now, I'd like to remind you that during the presentations, there might be some questions that come to your mind. So if there are, we ask that you place these questions on the chat. So please remember that any questions that you have, please place them on the chat, and we'll do our very best to ensure that these questions are asked of our presenters. So without further ado, I'll hand over now to Juliet as she introduces our first speaker.
Good evening, everyone. Last night, I introduced you to Dr. Syam, who presented Matters of the Heart. I shared with you a few hints and tips about him. I told you that he was born in South India. He wanted to be a doctor from the age of 10. He's been in practice for 22 years. Now, hold on a minute. I'm not asking you to add 22 to 10 and making the doctor 32. That would be wrong of me. However, he has his bride at his side and is a father of 2. Dr. Syam is a consultant and specializes in trauma and orthopedic surgery. He enjoys teaching and sharing his knowledge about lifestyle and preventative health. This evening topic is entitled, wait for it, because I'm sure you're all going to be interested, sleep, the rest everyone needs but commonly neglects. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please ensure you place them in the chat. The next voice that you're going to hear is that of Dr. Syam. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you all for joining the session. If you are a night owl or like a night out, if you think you can catch up on sleep over the weekend, if you need a few mugs of coffee to get through the day, if you need an alarm to wake up in the morning, or if you think sleep is a waste of time, you have come to the right place. Today's topic is my favorite thing, sleep. Not talking about sleep, but sleeping itself. A third of your life you spend on sleeping. And there are 2 types of sleep. One is rapid eye movement, or it's called REM sleep, or non-rapid eye movement, NREM sleep. It's during the REM sleep that we dream, and it occurs about 90 minutes, every 90 minutes. Benjamin Franklin said, early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. And by the end of this presentation, you will understand what it literally means. How do you know if you're getting enough sleep? To know, actually, sleep assessment is needed. But as a rule of thumb, you can just ask 3 simple questions. Number 1, after waking up in the morning, can you go back to sleep by about 11, 12 o'clock in the morning? If yes, you haven't had a good enough sleep, and it is not of good quality or quantity. Can you function optimally without caffeine, coffee before noon? Coffee is self-medicating to treat sleep deprivation. But by drinking coffee, you're making it worse. Number 3, can you wake up without an alarm clock? So if the answer to these, you know if you're sleeping enough. Sleep is as important as exercise and diet. And somebody said, a ruffled mind makes a restless pillow. If your mind is ruffled, you will not be able to sleep. And if you can't sleep, there are probably monsters in the room. Not monsters in the room, but maybe in your head, which could be jealousy, hatred, envy, unforgiving nature, and so forth. 3 meals plus bedtime makes 4 sure blessings in a day. 3 meals plus bedtime makes 4 sure blessings in a day. Let's talk about a clock, an internal clock in our body called circadian rhythm. All of you know that God created day and night. you don't see birds awake in the night, because first thing they wake up, they need to gather their food. They have to fend for themselves and for their baby birds. But we have electricity. These are luxuries. The electricity and the things that come with electricity, they are luxuries and blessings, but we depend a lot on them and ignore sleep. My source from about this talk is on a book called Why We Sleep by a neurophysiologist called Matthew Walker. So circadian rhythm is an endogenous, which means it's within us and it is self-generated rhythm. Like a heart rhythm, it's a 24-hour cycle which happens in our body, and after every 12 to 16 hours, we need sleep. Northern hemisphere, we have sun, and sometimes we don't have much sun, like the winter. There is a sleeping plant called Mimosa pudica, and this plant, whenever the sun comes, it opens up. But when the sun sets, the leaves close and go to sleep. And this is called heliotropism, which means helio is the sun, and it's a response to the sun. In 1729, a geophysicist has done an experiment. He took this plant to see if the room was fully dark, if the plant will keep its leaves open. And they kept the plant in the dark, and they just peeked and put cameras to see what happens. Whether there was sun or not, the plant just followed its circadian rhythm. So the daytime, it kept its leaves open, and the night, the leaves were closed. Interesting experience, isn't it? There were two professors in 1938. They wanted to prove more about the sleep, and they went for 6 weeks, and they were their own guinea pigs, and went into a cave. And it was so deep that there was no detectable daylight. And they came up with striking evidence. So they measured their body temperature, they measured what time they were waking up and what time they were sleeping, etc. And they've seen that just like the plants, they realize that we have endogenous circadian rhythm. And in the absence of light, they had predictable, repeated pattern of prolonged wakefulness or staying awake for 15 hours and then a sleep of 9 hours, whether they were in the sun or without the sun. And you want to go and see how the sunlight manipulates and resets the circadian rhythm. And the circadian rhythm resets every 24 hours. So, for example, somebody who's doing night shifts and all that, it takes time for you to, set your rhythm back after 24 hours. So the brain uses the daylight for the resetting purpose of the clock. And the daylight is most reliable repeating signal. But what about the blind? Even the blind do the same, although they're not getting any sunlight through their eyes, but the circadian rhythm is set because it's the internal clock. I've told you there are two types of sleep, REM sleep and non-REM sleep. So this clock, the circadian rhythm clock, is in the brain, at the base of the brain, where the nerves from the eyes go and meet. So the eyes from both the nerves come and meet, called chiasma, and it is just above that. So it's called suprachiasmatic nucleus. And this is what is the central conductor of life's biological rhythm and rhythmic symphony. Now, circadian rhythm regulates many things, not just sleep, but also body temperature. So 2 hours after we sleep, the body temperature is the lowest, and it goes up into the maximum at the in the noon. Emily Bront, a philosopher, said, a person who has not done one half of his day's work by about 11 o'clock, he runs a chance of leaving the other half undone. So we have to start the day early. And you might argue and say, I'm a night owl, I'm not a morning lark. But the day is what we need to make use of. Now, let me go to something called melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone. I'm not talking about melanin, I'm talking about melatonin. This is called the hormone of darkness. Melanin is the pigment that we have in our skin, and that's what makes my skin nice and brown. But this is melatonin, which is called the hormone of darkness. This hormone is the one which peaks at 3 a.m. in the morning and returns to normal level in the morning. So it starts sometime in the evening around 9, 10 o'clock, peaks at 3 a.m. and comes back to normal. And this level decreases in the morning automatically, even though when your eyes are closed, when there is daylight, if your eyes are closed, it still comes back to normal. So this melatonin, some of the pilots and crew members, they take artificial tablets of melatonin because their sleep is very haphazard and very disturbed. I want to talk to you about jet lag. Jet lag is biological time lag in the 24-hour rhythm. It's worse when you go east than going to the west, because we can always postpone sleep than trying to sleep too early. The body thinks it is time, it is the daytime in the new place. So you go to the new place and it's still the daytime and you still think it's daytime and you're awake. And body will not stay in that state forever, and it will take about a week or so for it to adjust. Unfortunately, when you go on a holiday, it might be the time to return and we have to come back and adjust to the new time. There have been a lot of studies done on crew, the air crew, and these have shown that the parts of the brain related to learning and memory had physically shrunk in these people because they don't sleep at correct times. And this suggests that there is destruction of brain cells. There is short-term memory, which is significantly impaired in these people on the studies that were done. Now let's go to coffee. You can mute the sleep signal that you get. Yawning is a great signal for sleep. So if you're yawning, that means your body is begging you to go and sleep. If any of you are yawning now, right now, please stop here and go to sleep. So yawning, the signal can be muted by drinking coffee or anything that has caffeine. Caffeine is the most widely used and abused psychoactive stimulant in the world. It is second most traded commodity in the world after oil. Can you believe? It is the longest and largest unsupervised drug. You don't need a prescription. You can just go take how much ever you want. So caffeine tricks you into feeling alert and awake. But the unfortunate thing is that the caffeine can linger in your body for up to 5 to 6 hours. And the moment you drink coffee, it peaks within 30 minutes and it will make you feel alert. But half of that caffeine still lingers in your blood for up to 5 to 6 years. So if you have a coffee at 7 p.m., it is still in your body at 1 a.m. And sleep will not come very easily or smoothly if you keep drinking coffee. And caffeine is found in coffee, tea, chocolate, ice creams, energy drinks, weight loss pills, and painkillers. And decaf does not mean it doesn't have any caffeine. It only means that it has got 20 to 30% of the caffeine. Okay. Caffeine crash is like this. Caffeine crash is like how batteries suddenly go down. The energy levels will plummet very rapidly. And once the caffeine goes down, you cannot function and you cannot concentrate and you feel very sleepy and you're craving for another cup of coffee. And the dependency cycle keeps going. And you keep saying, I need sugar, I need a brew. So a close study was done on spiders. All of us know spiders are beautiful and they make beautiful symmetrical artists they are. And in 1980, the NASA did an experiment on them by giving them caffeine, LSD, amphetamine, marijuana, etc. And the spiders became incapable of structuring a proper web because of the caffeine. Now let's look at sleep and health. Now, in short, one sentence take-home message: the shorter you sleep, the shorter your life is. It's like a burst water pipe. If a pipe is burst in the bathroom, it'll go into your bedroom, it'll go into your living room, it'll go everywhere in the house. Similarly, if you don't sleep enough, it can affect your every major system, tissue, and organ in the body. It can cause heart disease, obesity, dementia, diabetes, cancer, and everything it can cause. Don't forget, it can cause bad effects on immunity, reproductive system, infertility, and metabolism. Okay, now sleep loss and cardiovascular system, or the heart we're looking at. In 2011, they've done a study on young people, and they have looked at 500,000 people of varied race, ethnicity, age, etc. And 45 of these people had a risk of developing heart attack or died with a heart attack from 10 to 20 years from the start of the study, young people. And Japanese study also has shown that people who sleep less than 6 hours, they're 500% more likely to suffer one or more heart attacks. Lack of sleep is an independent risk factor for heart disease. Concentrate here. There's something called sympathetic nervous system. So there is sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic system is what comes into action when we have a fight or a flight mode in our life. If you see a snake or if you see a mad dog that you want to run away, you either fight the dog or you want to fly. And that's when adrenaline is produced in the body. There is huge rush, and that increases your heart rate, blood pressure, and respiratory rate. And when you don't sleep, the sympathetic system is on perpetually. So there is heart rate which is always high, respiratory rate which is always high, and blood pressure is high. So after the age of 45, listen please, if you're sleeping less than 6 hours, you are at a higher risk of getting a heart attack. We must prioritize sleep after you're 45, that is in midlife. But midlife is unfortunately the time where family and career take the toll in our lives. And we do exactly the opposite. We sleep less and less, and we want to earn more and settle the family, etc. But we do it at a cost. Some people say sleep is such a luxury, I cannot afford. But is it? You cannot afford, but at a cost. The industrialization is having catastrophic impact on health, our life expectancy, our safety and productivity, and the education of our children. In the developed nations, the sleep silent epidemic is the greatest public health challenge. And if we have to avoid the suffocation of sleep neglect and the premature death it inflicts on us and the sickening death it invites, we need a radical shift in our personal, cultural, professional, and social appreciation of sleep. And this is very important. Sleep loss and metabolism. So the less you sleep, the more you're likely to eat. Simple. Body becomes unable to manage those extra calories and you keep on putting weight. And the likelihood of getting type 2 diabetes is very high. And there is cost to health and quality of life, and there is hastened arrival of death. How this happens is very well understood. And diabetes, you will listen to it tomorrow, it can affect all organ systems. It can affect your eyes, nerves, kidney, heart, brain, you name it. Now, weight gain and obesity, there are two hormones that we need to study about. One is called leptin and the other one is called ghrelin. Leptin is a hormone which makes you feel that you're full when you're eating with food. And when leptin is high, the appetite is blunted and you don't feel hungry. And ghrelin is the opposite. Ghrelin triggers a strong sensation of hunger. When ghrelin is high, you want to eat. So leptin makes you feel full, ghrelin wants to make you eat. And when sleep is disturbed, these two are disturbed. There is imbalance of any of these hormones can trigger increased eating and both buttons are pushed in the wrong direction. So there have been studies done with people with less sleep and more sleep, and the studies have shown that ones who don't sleep enough, they're putting on weight. Now, the two hormones, leptin and ghrelin, are found to have bad effect on these people. And if you have less sleep, there is a decrease in the satiety signaling leptin, which is telling you that you're full. There is decreased signal of that. And there is increased signal of hunger instigating hormone, ghrelin. So when you don't sleep, you want to eat more and more, and your body is telling you that you're still more hungry, although you have eaten. And it's a classic case of double jeopardy. It's punished twice. You're punished twice for the same offense by removing the signal and increasing the signal that you're hungry. In the words of this researcher, they said, a sleep-deprived body will cry famine in the midst of plenty. You may have so much, you eat more, but your body is crying, saying you're hungry, you're hungry. You can argue that if we are awake, we can burn more calories, but sadly that's not true. Even after staying awake for 24 hours, the calories you burn is minimal. Sleep is an intensely metabolically active state for brain and body alike. You must have heard older people saying, you grow when you sleep. And you do indeed grow when you sleep, because there's a lot of metabolic activity that's going on. Now, there is obesity and there's a reproductive system which can be affected. There is a lot of infertility because of obesity, which leads to early menarche and early period in girls, and then they'll have infertility. In men, it's been found out that their sperm count is less, and the sperms are not very active, and all this leads to less libido and tired and fatigue and less testosterone levels, etc. All these things. Now, before I finish, I want to give you 12 tips for good sleep. Number 1, stick to a sleep schedule. We always put alarm to wake up, but put an alarm to go to sleep. That's very, very important, because going to bed at the right time, at the correct time every day is a good habit, and waking up is a good habit. Number 2, exercise is great, but not too late in the day. Try to exercise at least for 30 minutes on most days, but no later than 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. Avoid caffeine and nicotine and all these drinks, certain colas and chocolate and things like that. Please avoid that. Nicotine also, please avoid. Number 4, avoid alcoholic drinks before bed. Having a drink may make you relax, but then it robs you of REM sleep. REM sleep is the best sleep, the deep sleep. It will rob you that. Number 5, avoid large meals and beverages late at night. A light snack is okay, but a large meal can cause indigestion, which can interfere with your sleep. If possible, avoid medicines that delay or disrupt your sleep. Some heart medication, blood pressure medication, cough, cold mixtures, all those things will have medication which will keep you alert and awake. Number 7, don't take a nap after 3 p.m. Naps are very good to catch up with some sleep, but then if you sleep too late in the afternoon, you won't feel asleep at night. Number 8, relax before bed. Don't overschedule. Don't watch something very on the telly like a sport, and don't do that, because your life needs unwinding before you go back to sleep. You need a relaxing activity such as reading or listening to soft music. Number 9, take a hot bath before bed. The drop in body temperature also helps you to relax and go to bed. 10, dark bedroom, cool bedroom, which is gadget free, is what is important. Don't have a TV, cell phone, or computer in your room, and put your phones off. And if you get to this habit, then you'll be able to wake up without an alarm. One of the excuses that people give is, I need an alarm, that's why I have my phone, but that's not needed. 11, have the right sunlight exposure. Daylight is the key to regulating the sleep patterns. You must be exposed, go out, go for a walk, and it will help you to sleep. Number 12, don't lie in bed awake. If you find yourself still awake after 20 minutes or half an hour, you're probably feeling anxious or worried about something. Get up, read something, relax, and then go back to sleep. I hope this talk helps. I'm ready for any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Syam. Wow, that's just amazing. You've really given some Harvard evidence and things to ponder on and actually change our lifestyle. But I have some questions for you. Yeah. How much sleep should an adult or a child get per night?
An adult, on average, should sleep at least 8 hours a day, 8 to 9 hours a day. Minimum 8 hours is what is needed. And for a child, depending on their age, if somebody is under 5, they probably need 12 to 14 hours of sleep. But a 10-year-old would easily require about 10 hours of sleep. That's how much you need.
Thank you. So a child needs about 10 hours?
Yes.
Oh, wow. The older they get, do they need more or less?
The older they get, I think the middle age, about 40, 50, 8 hours is probably enough. But then after 60, 70, I think they need a bit more sleep. And that's why it's good to have an afternoon nap as well for them, but not too late in the day.
Brilliant. A question here. This person has lots of drinks before going to bed and the sleep is interrupted. How can they get themselves out of that habit?
Well, I would suggest you slowly cut down on the amount you drink. If you're drinking, I don't know, whatever the units that you drink, you slowly cut down, and maybe you can have a drink maybe a bit earlier in the day and gradually cut that down, and then you will be able to sleep better. That's what I would recommend.
Okay. That's a bit difficult because they're trying to get more litres of water in. So if they're trying to get 2 or 3 litres of water in and there's not enough time in the day, what should they do?
Sure. I'm sorry, I misunderstood that question. I thought you were talking about alcoholic drinks, but if you're talking about water, I think you need to load your body with at least 2/3 of your water requirement by 12 noon. What I personally do, I drink 2 large pints of water with some lime and a tiny bit of salt first thing in the morning. So that is probably 1/3 of my water requirement. And I drink at least 2 more pints of water before 12 o'clock in the noon. So I don't have to drink too much too late in the evening.
Wow, thank you. This is a big one for everybody. Well, for some people. My partner snores and keeps me awake. It's ruining my marriage. What should I do?
I think you need to consult a somnologist. Somnologist is the one who is specialized in sleep. So this is a very common problem. I never snore because I don't know if I snore. But you must need a somnologist. You need to have a sleep study. And once you have a sleep study, there can be some medical causes itself which can cause snoring. That can be avoided. And there are some small tips and some instruments that they suggest that you put it on your nose and things like that, that will help you to sleep and not snore. But you need sleep studies. You need sleep studies, or your partner needs sleep studies, and they'll be able to help you with that.
So these devices, can you actually buy them online or from the chemist?
You can buy from Boots and places like that.
Okay.
Yes.
My snoring wakes me up. Oftentimes it scares me. Now, this is not me personally. I'm just asking the question, right? People snore and they alarm themselves. What should they do?
Okay. One of the common reasons for snoring is that when you're sleeping like that, your tongue falls back. Your tongue falls back, and that kind of compromises the airway a little bit. So the space for the air exchange is narrowed, and that's what causes the snoring predominantly. So one of the main causes is obesity or overweight. If somebody is overweight, they snore. But then the most common cause is the tongue falling back, and that causes narrowing of the air passage, and that suddenly there can be air hunger, and that's when they wake up. That's what happens. You must consult a somnologist.
Okay, thank you.
I won't be able to help with that.
Can certain foods trigger snoring or trigger you to have lack of sleep? So if we, for example, if we eat too much chocolate, or I don't know, what do you think?
Anything that has sugar, caffeine, chocolates, cakes, and pastries, all those things will affect sleep. And even a good food, which is a full meal that you ate too late in the night, can affect your sleep. And that has a great impact on your sleep. You've got to avoid those things.
So do you know foods that are heavy in salt, can that have an effect? Salty foods?
Salty foods, not on sleep itself, but on other things such as heart and blood pressure. That's what it can have.
My last question is, how can shift workers manage their sleep more effectively?
I think when you have a shift pattern, when you come back, you have to have this particular time, routine. You need to have a routine. Come back, have a shower, put the phone away, and sleep. You might want to, sometimes you might want to give a call to your family who are out in another country, and you want to do certain things like that. But then you must give priority and importance to sleep, and you should not have any disturbance to sleep, and you should just come back and sleep. And when you have to just prioritize. You have to just prioritize, and you have to, or the family members need to help with the other chores like cooking and shopping and things like that. And when you have 4 nights that you have to do, you have to plan your week ahead, and you might have to cook early enough and put it in the fridge and things like that. And you have to prioritize sleeping. If you're not getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, it's a bad thing for you.
Thank you. I did say that was the last, but I've just got one more that I want to ask you. I'm in pain, and the pain is stopping me from sleeping. What do I do?
Well, if you got any joint or bone pain, you can come and see me. I can help you with that. But then if the pain is something else due to mental or some other pain, you need to see your doctor. And there are ways to come out of those things and have exercise and all those things. Even if you're in pain, if you do some regular exercise, that will help you to sleep better. But depending on what pain you're talking about.
Okay. Just linking to that, I'm sure, did I hear correctly that you said painkillers contain caffeine?
Some of the painkillers.
Right.
Most of the painkillers like codeine, tramadol, paracetamol, cocodamol, they don't have caffeine. They actually help you sleep as well. Actually, one of the side effects is sleep. But then there are some cough mixtures and Lemsip and all those things will have caffeine. Those things will not allow you to sleep well.
Okay, that's my questions for tonight. I want to thank you so much, and I will now hand over to Leroy.
Thank you. God bless.
Okay. Thank you, Juliet and Dr. Syam. Now, last night, Dr. Magna gave a very informative presentation on guilt and shame. And we heard that guilt and shame don't always have to be a negative thing. But we found out that there are differences between the two. Now, guilt is feeling bad about a particular behavior that's been involved in. And shame is when someone feels bad about who they are as a person. And sometimes an individual may feel both of these at the same time. And Dr. Magna then gave some guidance on how to channel these feelings into something more positive. So tonight we welcome Dr. Magna again, and I'm going to turn the time over to her now, and we're going to look at this evening how to deal with depression.
Good evening, everyone. Good to be with you again on this. It's bright and sunny here in the US. I don't know what it's like in the UK, but I'm glad to be with you all again. And we're going to get right into the topic of dealing with depression. And I like to talk about this in terms of dealing with it naturally. Some of the things you've already heard, so I may skip some things. When I say you already heard, you're going to hear certain steps and principles that apply to dealing with various diseases. In fact, it's just amazing to see how these principles can apply to different diseases. So let's start out with just giving a brief definition or description of depression. It's a mental health disorder characterized by persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities causing significant impairment in life. That's the thing about depression. It often causes impairment in life. And so that's why people suffer from it so much. Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. When you think about the various reasons people take disability, depression is the leading cause. According to the World Health Organization, and this is as of 2017, and maybe even more now, 300 million people around the world have depression. and this is interesting, everyone will at some time in their life be affected by depression, either their own or by someone else's. So it's important for us to take heed to depression because it's going to affect you at some point or another. And those who are listening probably can say yay to that. I looked this up real quickly. The rate of depression doubled in the UK during the COVID-19 pandemic. Isn't that something? It doubled in the UK. And there were 4 groups that were most likely to experience depression during the COVID-19 in the UK. People ages 16 through 39. So it's kind of a younger group. Females were more likely to experience depression during this pandemic. Those who are disabled and those who are unable to afford unexpected expenses. So those are the groups, based on the statistics that were gathered in the UK, who are more likely to be experiencing depression during this COVID-19. I thought that was so interesting. Depression can consist of different symptoms. I'll just list briefly a few of them for you. When you have persistent, sad, anxious, or empty mood, and the operative word here is persistent. All of us feel sad at some point in time. All of us feel anxious. All of us may feel empty. But depression occurs when it's persistent, sad, anxious, or empty mood. Loss of interest or pleasure is another symptom of depression. You might be a person who used to like to cook, and you suddenly find yourself not having an interest in it, or you used to like to tinker with the car, but you lost interest. That could be a symptom of depression. Difficulty concentrating or making decisions, losing or gaining weight, or eating too much or eating too little. Too much sleep or too poor sleep. We just had the doctor talking about sleep, so I'm not going to say too much about sleep. Increased agitation or increased slowness. Sometimes you could be more easily agitated or irritable, and that's a symptom of depression. Decreased energy, also feelings of worthlessness or excessive guilt, and then not only suicidal thoughts, but just thoughts of death, sometimes ruminating about what would it be like to die, not actually thinking about killing yourself, and even past suicidal attempts. Now, because you may have one of these symptoms, please do not diagnose yourself with depression. In order to do it clinically, you have to have a certain amount, 5 out of 9 in the last 2 weeks. So you want to not diagnose yourself too much. Now, typically, when we're dealing with depression, there are 2 main strategies or methods of treatment that's used. One is counseling, which I do, and the other is antidepressants. Now, there's mixed feelings about antidepressants. I do know the research show that people are increasingly taking antidepressants, not necessarily because they're depressed, but they just want help in dealing with things like death or a divorce or adjusting to something. It's antidepressant use is really increasing. And honestly, I'm concerned about going to antidepressant as the first line of treatment if you're not severely depressed. I like to be able to talk with people, but I also like to do some of the things you will hear reoccurring in these seminars, and that is to determine what is your lifestyle. I have helped many people with depression by just changing their lifestyle, helping them change how they eat. You'd be amazed at foods that we eat that can either increase depression or decrease it, getting them to bed at night. The previous doctor talked about that. Exercising, all of these things can happen. We're going to briefly talk about some of these. In the Bible, there's a verse that says, "The curse causeless shall not come." If there's a curse, there's going to be a cause. And we want to find the true cause for depression. And Dr. Walsh, Roger Walsh, a psychiatrist, several years ago, he reviewed the research on the effects of something called therapeutic lifestyle changes, or TLCs. And this included exercise, nutrition and diet, relationships, recreation, relaxation and stress, religious or spiritual involvement. I should add relaxation and stress management, religious or spiritual involvement, spending time in nature, and service to others. His review reveals that these lifestyle changes, listen to this, everyone, can be as effective as drugs or counseling for many mental health concerns. Isn't that amazing? Eating better, exercising, relaxing, getting good recreation, having good relationships, being involved spiritually and religiously, spending time in nature, doing service to others. His review of the research, this is not him just coming up. He looked at the research, and the research shows engaging in these therapeutic lifestyle changes can be just as effective as coming to talk to me as a counselor or getting on medication. I thought that was phenomenal, because over 100 plus years ago, a health educator that we believe is inspired, I believe is inspired, in a book she wrote called Ministry of Healing. Listen to what she said over 100 years before Dr. Walsh said what he just said. She says, pure air, sunlight, abstemiousness, which is an older word for temperance or self-control, rest, exercise, proper diet, the use of water, trust in divine power, she says, these are the true remedies. So long before science came up with this woman wrote this information and let us know that these are the true remedies. That's why you're going to hear about these when talking about diabetes, a high blood pressure, and other diseases. And I also want to put it for depression. So let's just share a little bit about nutrition. You've heard a lot about nutrition already, or a little bit, I guess. But it was found that whole food diets are very good for depression, because depression is related to inflammation in the body. You probably hear that time and time again through these seminars, and low levels of serotonin. There's some question about the serotonin theory, but for right now, I'm holding to it. Depression is related to inflammation and low levels of serotonin. It could also be related to low iron, to low levels of vitamin B, and to other mineral and vitamin deficiencies. So if that's what's going on with depression, getting on a plant-based diet can be really helpful for lowering inflammation, and because these plant food diets are high in antioxidants. So you want to increase your plant foods. One of the things that I tell almost everybody that I work with depression is to increase their omega-3. Omega-3 is good for the brain. You probably heard this. I have put people on 2 to 3 tablespoons of ground flax seeds daily, and some of them have reported much improvement with their depression. So if you're suffering with depression right now, that's not something that's hard to find. And you can get that in the UK, I'm sure, because I've recommended this for people in the UK. Find some flax seeds, grind it, and start to take at least 2 to 3 tablespoons of ground flax seeds every day. You can put it over your salad, over your cereal, in a smoothie. I'm not saying that this will be the cure-all for your depression, but it will take you down the road. So you want to, there's more and more research showing that plant-based diets are connected with a lower risk of depression and can help people with depression. You also want to increase things such as almonds, pumpkin seeds. All of these are in plant-based diets because they're high in tryptophan, they're high in omega-3, they're high in good carbohydrates, good folates. All of these help with depression. So the bottom line is increase your plants. And when you want to, I've also found a lot of times people who are depressed, they crave sweets because sweets act like a drug. They have an immediate mood elevating effect, but in the long term, they actually make the mood worse, and they reduce well-being, and they increase inflammation, which I said earlier can cause depression, or is related to depression. This is not found in the research. This is anecdotal, but I have found in my experience that sometimes people who take the 2 to 3 tablespoons of ground flaxseed that I recommended, they find that their sweet tooth reduces. They find that their craving for sweet reduces. So that's a tip for you if you're dealing with that. It's also been found that women who are heavy coffee drinkers tend to be more depressed, and they have an increased risk of suicide. So you want to stay away from things like coffee. Nicotine is also related to depression, alcohol. So alcohol is not good for many things, in spite of the research saying that it's helpful. We have to be careful with it. And this is nothing new, because in the very beginning of time, God told us in Genesis 1:29 that he'd given us every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree which is on the fruit which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. So this was the original diet that God gave to us. And with depression, it can help. You know, some of you may have heard of gut health. There's more and more research showing that the gut is related to the brain. And there's information that shows that the gut relays information to the brain through something known as the vagus nerve. And 90% of our serotonin is produced in our gut. So what does that tell me? We need to be watching our digestion. I'm working with more and more people and getting them to take probiotics, do things that will help their digestion to address their depression, because sometimes the depression is related to poor digestion. This same woman who I mentioned earlier, listen to what she says. I thought it's interesting. She says the digestive organs, in a book called Counsel on Diet and Foods, she says the digestive organs have an important part to play in our life happiness. People who have a sour stomach, she says, are very often of a sour disposition. If we would have peace among ourselves, we should give more thought than we do to having a peaceful stomach. And there's things that we do that cause war in our stomach, and I wish I could elaborate on it. Not eating on a regular schedule, drinking when we eat, eating in between meals, eating too late. All of these cause war in the stomach because it affects the digestion, which in turn can affect our mental health. Exercise is also important for depression. Studies show that if you exercise 3 to 5 times a week for 30 to 60 minutes at a fairly high level of intensity, in about 4 to 6 weeks, you will see an improvement in your depression. That's 3 to 5 times a week for 30 to 60 minutes at a fairly high level of intensity, you will see improvements in your depression. Research shows that depressed people who participate in an aerobic exercise program, they improved in their depression as much as those who took Zoloft. And there's a lot of these medications that are being given. In fact, one psychiatrist wrote a book called, I think it's Natural Prozac, if I'm not mistaken, and he talks about how exercise can be like Prozac. So if you're not exercising and you're dealing with depression, even if you're not dealing with your depression, if you want your mind to function better, get out there and exercise. Water is also good. I worked with a young lady, 16 years old, whose depression was merely due to the fact that she was not drinking enough water. She was mildly depressed. Put her on a water program, her depression went away. Now, I'm not saying this will happen with everybody, but all of these are different causes of depression. You want to drink more water. There's also something called hot and cold showers. I remember recommending this to people and they saw some decrease in their depression. And quickly, you do the hot for 3 minutes, as hot as you can stand it, and then you turn the water over to as cold as you can stand it for 30 seconds. Do that 3 cycles, hot for 3 minutes, cold for 30 seconds. It does wonders to your body. It increases the neurotransmitters that are problematic in depression. And if you're bold enough to do this, you will see a difference in your depression. They're called contrast showers. I'm going to repeat that again. 3 minutes hot, 30 seconds cold. Do that 3 times for about 7 to 10 days. You will see a difference in your depression. I want to encourage you to do that. Sunlight is also important for depression. One study found that they measured the serotonin levels in the blood of healthy men during the sunlight. The serotonin levels were higher. Doing things such as rain and cloudiness, the serotonin levels were lower. So we want to make sure we get sunlight. Vitamin D is related to that. Sometimes people are depressed because their vitamin D levels are low. So I encourage people to make sure they check on their vitamin D levels. And then sleep. I don't have to say much about that because you just got a wonderful lecture on sleep. I heard part of this, but I did want to share this. Maybe someone mentioned this before, but the same woman who's the health educator, her name is, by the way, Ellen White. The same woman who I mentioned earlier, she came up with this formula saying sleep is worth far more before than after midnight. I have to work with all my clients on getting to bed before midnight because there's some physiological things that go on in the brain between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And if you're not asleep, you miss out on that. And some of those things, such as the peak production of melatonin, it has an impact on depression. So she goes on to say sleep is worth far more before than after midnight. 2 hours of sleep before 12 o'clock is worth more than 4 hours of sleep after 12 o'clock. So if you're dealing with depression, and even if you're not, if you want to get the full effect from sleep, you want to go to bed earlier. This was interesting to me because this research came out over 100 years after this woman made this statement. Teenagers who stay up late have a higher chance of being depressed or suicidal than teenagers who go to bed 10 p.m. or earlier. You see that her thoughts, that principle she came up without research is true. Teenagers, if you're dealing with going to bed after 10, you're going to have a higher rate of suicide. So you want to get to bed on time and be regular. Now, besides all these other things I've mentioned, you also want fresh air. You've heard all of these before. I wanted to throw in a few things before I end that's also helpful for depression. Music. Music therapy can be helpful, especially listening to classical music. It's been found to improve mood and reduce stress. In fact, at one of the universities here in the US, the University of Pittsburgh, there was a correlation found between major depression, listen everyone, and the amount of time that teenagers spend with popular music. The more time spent with popular music, teenagers, and I would believe this is probably for adults too, but they just study teenagers. The more time spent listening to popular music, the more depressed people felt. Conversely, on the other hand, the more people spent reading print media, such as books, the less depressed they were. So it's so interesting to me that, and that's because you're using the frontal lobe. When we listen to certain kinds of music, it doesn't stimulate the frontal music. It may sound good, the frontal lobe, it may sound good, but it doesn't stimulate the frontal lobe. Reading, especially reading that will get you to think, stimulates the frontal lobe. So it would make sense that reading would improve depression, whereas listening to popular music makes it worse. I know that's hard to hear for some, but I'm just presenting the research. So see if you can stick in some classical music, even hymns, because hymns are constructed in a similar way to classical music. Then we have what we think. You've heard me talk about this before. One person says the primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, but your thoughts about it. In many cases, depression comes about because we continue to say negative things to ourselves, such as, I'm no good, I'm a total failure, nothing ever goes my way. Starting to identify the thoughts that you'd say to yourself if you're depressed or anxious or stressed, and changing those, replacing those with better thoughts, will help you very much. I'm going to just end with talking a little bit about the research on religion. Results of one study found that when people are spiritual but not religious, the risk of depression increases. I get people all the time who tell me, I read their profiles and they say, oh, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I don't want to be involved with an organization. It's not good. It's so interesting that the research shows that being spiritual but not religious increases your risk of depression. Religion provides some structure, and I know some people have had bad experiences with religion, and some of how we present it is not the best. But I just wanted to share with you that religion in the right way, religion that recognizes who God is important. Religion can have a negative impact, though. If you questioning God's love for you, if you believe God has abandoned you, if you view God as threatening, that can have a negative result. So you want to have a religion which views God in a positive way. And also, you want to also make sure that you learn to, a person who's dealing with depression, learn about God's love. That can be as helpful, because the research shows that people who receive less love in their lives always also experience higher levels of depression. I'm going to stop here because we want a little time. We have about 6 minutes for questions, and I want you to hopefully you've gleaned something from this to be able to deal with depression. So I'll stop for questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Magna. I have a few questions here already. Let's kick off with this first question. Is it possible for someone to be depressed without them being aware of it?
Yes, it is. Very much so. They can have symptoms such as fatigue. They can be getting angry very quickly. They can have problems sleeping, all of these. So yes, it is possible for a person to be depressed. You want to read up on depression. If you're wondering about it, you want to talk to somebody, at least to be diagnosed, and that can be helpful. So yes, that is possible.
So if a person isn't aware of it, how is it that would it rely then on maybe somebody else to point out if they notice any of these indicators?
Yes, that's why I said they would see a professional to be able to help them diagnose that. Yes. Okay.
The next question, is depression contagious as an emotion? Can somebody else?
Well, it's not contagious. Yeah, it's not contagious like coronavirus, but sometimes our mood can impact other people. Whether or not it can lead to depression, I'm not sure about that, but our mood can impact other people and it can have an impact on people. So I prefer to say that than to say it's contagious.
Right, okay. The next question, is there a connection between stress and depression?
Oh, yes, there is. You can be so stressed, have so many stressors in your life that it starts to affect your mood. It starts to affect your concentration. It starts to make you feel very sad. So yes, too much stress can actually lead to depression, and the two of them are often found together. So yes, there is a relationship between the two.
Okay, yeah. And then what would you say to somebody who is, they have a very heavy work schedule, maybe a lot of stress at work? What would the indicators be for that particular individual?
Poor sleep, overeating or not eating enough, snapping quickly, irritability, getting angry quickly. Those are some of the things that may come about. They may have issues in relating to their family members where in the past they did not. Those can be some indicators that that's what's going on. Okay,
yeah. And could you say maybe a little bit more then about how you found that exercise is a good means of helping with depression?
Yes, I usually tell people to exercise. Well, it increases endorphins. It increases a lot of neurotransmitters. It helps you feel good. It reduces inflammation. These are the things that makes exercise helpful for depression. There's something actually physiologically going on.
Okay. We have another question here that's just come through. When does depression become clinical or more chronic?
You have to, based on the measures, the symptoms that I mentioned, I can't think of all of them, but there are 9 symptoms. And if you have 5 of those symptoms, of those 9 symptoms, if you experience them within the last couple of weeks, you would be diagnosed as depression, as depressed, clinically depressed. And then some of those symptoms, you may not have the 5 out of the 9, but if you've been experiencing those symptoms for months, yay, sometimes years, then you're dealing with chronic depression. So you have to look at symptoms such as sleep issues, appetite, irritability, problems sleeping, those things that I mentioned earlier, and that will determine whether or not you're depressed.
Okay. We have one here relating to medication. How safe is it using some of these antidepressant medications?
Oh, that's a very controversial issue. Everybody will tell you something different. I don't think it's problematic if you're losing it short term. I don't know if there's any, honestly, research out there that shows the long-term effects. Although there is a doctor, Dr. Peter Breggin, who talks about this impact on the brain. You might want to check him out, Breggin. He's on YouTube. There's no research on it. I like to see people not be on it for very long unless they're severely depressed. And then we also want to see what we could do to get them off. So I can't tell you, I have to base things on research, and I don't know research that shows what the negative effects are. There's some bad side effects though. Sometimes the antidepressants actually make you more depressed, sad to say, but that's all I can say about that.
Yeah. Okay, we thank you, Dr. Magna, for your presentation. I don't know if there's a closing comment you'd like to make before we finish your section.
I want to just encourage you. Yeah, I want to encourage people to really listen to these presentations and really grab onto these principles that we're talking about when we're talking about the importance of nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine. They sound so simple. And sometimes people, unless it's very complex, people kind of, dismiss certain things. But I can tell you from experience, if you start following these principles, your life will never be the same. So I want to encourage you to grab onto this information that we're sharing with these principles, and I'm sure you will benefit from it. That's what I want to share with people.
Okay, we appreciate your contribution again this evening, but afternoon where you are. So thank you again,
Yes.
Dr. Magna. Thank you. We'll move into our third section now, and we're looking at life's philosophical questions. And I'll hand over this section now to Basil.
Thank you, Leroy. Once again, just thankful everybody can be here for this series 4 or day 4 of the Total Transformation series. I'm happy to introduce to you the presenter tonight, who is called Jairaj Kanagaraj. He is from Birmingham, married with 2 children called Jessica and Joshua, and is employed as a senior manager for the NHS. That's just a little bit about Jairaj. Are you there, Jairaj?
Yes, Basil, thank you.
Okay, let's get down to business, Jairaj. Would you agree with me? Would you agree with me that we are in a mess? And what I'm saying is this, bear with me, is that we are faced with a situation where we're in a crisis situation. There's job losses, there's redundancies, there's business closures, there's a threat of the mandatory vaccinations, anxiety, unrest, and we don't even know what the future holds for any one of us. This is a question that I want to ask you, Jairaj. Why did God give us the power of choice and now hold us responsible for the mess that we're in? To me, it's like as if he's just left us by ourselves. How would you respond to that?
Yes, Basil, thank you for the question. And it's a very good question. At the same time, it's a most complex question. But I agree with you. Yes, we are in this mess. We have a lot of issues around us, as you mentioned. But going back to your question, why did God give us this freedom of choice or power of choice? It has been said like power of choice is a blessing to man. And, you know, it's a great feature man can possess. You know, humans are blessed in that way, exactly in the same way that they're blessed with intelligence. And so, you know, I come from where I come from, India. We call those who fought for freedom, you know, to get independence from the British. We call them freedom fighters. Okay, so it shows us that freedom was so much important. So in the government of God, freedom becomes very much important. I want to just share by giving you an example, quick example, why power of choice was important, why it was given to us. Where I lived, where I grew up, I had 2 friends, and both were brothers, and they lived just down the street from our home. And one brother, he was very studious. He applied himself so diligently, and he studied well. He graduated. He, you know, from a business school. He had a very good job, I think, in an insurance company. He married and he's well. But the other brother was the total opposite. You know, he partied, enjoyed, you know, and he was into drugs, and he experimented things like alcohol, tobacco, and so on. And you can see here, you can see where I'm going, Basil, because you can see he remained in regret as he grew up, seeing his brother in a very good position. Both had the same opportunities. Each of them are living, you know, based on the consequences of their choices. So it was really, really key and important that God gave us this power of choice, but he also, you know, left us to face that consequence of the choice that we make. Another thing is, I want to say this later down the line as we go, it is God's love that made him to give this freedom. Instead, we will be like robots.
Jairaj, let me just step in there. I'm just thinking that when we ask the question, why did God give us the power of choice? See, I wasn't there. I'm not talking about the past. I'm talking about the here and now.
Yeah.
What happened in the past is nothing to do with me. I'm assuming You're talking about Adam and Eve and what's happening there. That has nothing to do with me. There might be some people out there saying, well, why do I have to pay the penalty for somebody else's mistake? It's got nothing to do with me. So what would you say then?
Right. It's we all come down as part of humanity. Although Adam and Eve had committed that mistake, or looking at the past, we hold the same flesh. We hold the same traits. We carry down the same the characters that they left for us. So we have the same tendency and intention today to create evil, and in the same way, disobey and go against God's will. So although their mistake had nothing to do with us, we still have the same capabilities that they had, and we are, as humans, committing the same mistakes that our parents in Eden committed.
Jairaj, just picking up on that, just a quick question. Why God is God. God is God. He's mighty, he's powerful, he knows everything and he sees everything. Why did he not do something then? Why did he not prevent something from happening, knowing full well that he could see everything and that he knows everything? He could have done something, but he didn't. Why?
Yes, this is some of the question that comes out from people who are going through difficulty. But did God not do anything? That's a question we need to ask. We think, okay, God is all powerful, so therefore he should have stopped what he knew, because God is omnipotent. God is omniscient.
Sorry, I don't. What does that mean, Jairaj? I think. What does that mean?
Okay. Yes. So for God, when you say he's omniscient, he's all-knowing. Okay. When you say God is omnibenevolent, he is a very good God. And when you say God is omnipotent, he is all-powerful God. So naturally, what happens is it tends for us to think that, because he knows everything, so he should have stopped the evil. He could have foreseen this and he could have stopped it. Or he is all powerful. He could have got everything under his control. Or he is a benevolent and loving God. Why do he see us suffering? So it all comes out of us having that perception of God, and we tend to ask such questions. But I cannot see that anything like atheism or philosophy can bring answer to the, give an answer to this. But I can see that the Bible provides an answer. Close from here, there is a cathedral, Coventry Cathedral. You see on one side of the cathedral, you would see the cathedral was destroyed by a bomb blast. And that's just left for us as visitors to see what the destruction has caused. On the other side, you can see beautiful building of other part of the cathedral. So there is beauty and bomb, both sides. So that's how our human life is as well. And yeah.
Okay. You said something a few seconds ago about evil, right? I mean, there is you only have to put the TV on and you hear so much evil that's going, it's incredible. I mean, whose fault is that? Is this man's fault? Is this God's fault? Or is this a social problem, a psychological issue that has been going on from centuries after centuries? So who is responsible for the evil that we're seeing today? What's your answer to that?
I think if you take the Bible literally, or in a fundamentalistic sense, you could see that it's of course necessary, as I earlier mentioned, to assume that anything and everything, good or bad, is directly or immediately God's activity. It's generally assumed that way, and therefore God is seen as one who is responsible for this evil. Maybe that's how the world looks at. But God had foreknowledge. In his foreknowledge, he could see the future. He had planned for it. But I want to tell you something, Basil, that God's role with evil is that he is never the author of the evil. Okay, you can say today, everyone thinks that evil is not within us, so man is not responsible. Evil is around us, so God's responsible. This is how the world thinks. There is no longer, the world does not hold this Christian worldview. So our culture sees that evil is around us and not within us. Look at, for example, Basil, look at the evil of terrorism. Okay, how many young minds are radicalized? Think of the movies that we watch, for example. Look at the impact pornography has taken into the culture. Many tend to go after these, like, in terms of searching for happiness, but they only end up with a feeling. And this environment is conditioning our mind, and it's causing a huge damage.
So Jairaj, where is it coming from though? This evil, is it because we're watching too much TV? Where is this evil originated from?
Yeah, you're asking one of the right questions. That's where I'm heading towards, Basil.
Okay.
Because, that's a very good question. I think we must take responsibility for our choices. We discussed the power of choice. We must take responsibility of our choices, and for in a sense that we see the Christian belief is that in which the first created beings, for example, Adam and Eve that we discussed, they attempt to cover up. They do not want to take responsibility of their choices. I think you must have heard the Watergate scandal in the United States in the early 1970s. Some of you, must know, where the White House focused totally on the cover-up of this scandal. So human tendency is cover up, and we think that we are not to be blamed. But what I'm going to say to is this evil comes from within us. The Bible tells us that the heart is deceitful beyond all things. I want to say one last point. If evil is around us, where would have it come firstly from? It should have come firstly from within us. Think of a murderer. His murder, the thought comes from within him. So we are to be blamed for the evil that we are, seeing around us. Saying all that, there is other evil, or other things that causes suffering, like natural disaster, which is out of our control in a way, because today's climatic change, you think about it, Basil. Where does it come from? All those plastics that we use and all these things, is damaging our environment and eventually causing harm to us.
But Jairaj, just let me stop you there. Some people will say that, from my understanding, that if there's a God, there's a devil. There is somebody called Satan, and it started from him. I mean, I know you're saying that it's within us, but then I'm thinking, where does it, can you just very quickly, because I want to move on to something different, yes. But is it from Satan or what?
Okay, so the biblical concept of this is that, the first war the first choice that what happened is because of a bad choice by Satan himself in heaven, way before it came down, or way before in earth. There was this struggle that was in heaven, this evil, that tendency that the Bible teaches. Okay, so but what we have, the idea as human beings, or specifically Christians, we tend to blame on Satan for everything.
Right.
We have been given the choice, the choice to make, you remember the story I mentioned of my two friends. We have been given the choice, same situation, but, the choice we make brings the consequences. And of course, there is this evil power that the Bible teaches that is above us, but we have still control of the choices that we make. And because that's a gift from God that we believe.
Okay, let me just quickly move on, Jairaj, because I'm just thinking of time and I've got some questions. Very quickly, we talked about free will, that from the beginning, God's supposed to have given us free will. I mean, personally, has God left us alone? Because sometimes I feel like he has just said, it's got nothing to do with me, you made the choice, and he's left us by ourselves. What would you say about that? Has God left us alone?
No, I think it's a good question as well. God has not left us alone. I think that is what we feel. My brother, he lost his 7-year-old son. He had a caught death. It was a devastating time for the family, and my brother went through this struggle of where is God, why, and all those sort of questions. He went through a struggle, and it's a very, very difficult time, and suffering is real. I'm not here going to say it's not real. It is real. We face it on a day-to-day basis. And this is where, actually I was going to come to, this point at my conclusion, but I want to say, Christianity provides that answer. Maybe I can't give you the ultimate answer, but the answer is found in Jesus. God suffers with us. That's what Christianity teaches.
Okay, Jairaj. Okay. Well, we said earlier on that God is supposed to have, created the whole universe. He is powerful. You said to me that he sees everything. He knows everything. If he knew that, if he knew the problems that we would be having now, why did he allow evil to exist? Why didn't he just kill it and destroy it, and then we would live happily ever after? Why are we finding ourselves in a situation now? If God is God and he says who he is a loving God, he's supposed to be a loving God. Some people out there thinking, I'm seeing so much evil around. There's so much, a friend of ours has passed away just recently. He's leaving a young couple with a wife and a child and a baby to come. This is fact. This is serious. So if God is a loving God, why didn't he just, knowing full well, destroy all that and then be done with it, and let's have a peaceful world? Because this is the situation we're facing now, isn't it?
Yes, it goes beyond from what we are thinking, because we can think, yes, God can stop all this, but it's not the way it works. From how God created mankind and how he gave them the power of choice, and he allowed them to he gave them a set of rules, that this is how it's going to work, and he gave them the freedom whether to abide by those rules. Now, because man disobeyed those rules, the evil existed into this world. Now, if God immediately says, okay, now that you disobeyed me, I'm going to rectify all this, by reverting back the whole thing, that wouldn't look right. So what God did was he kind of found a solution by undoing everything, by bringing Jesus, his son, in. Okay, by bringing Jesus in, he is bringing in a remedy. He is suffering with us. Jesus suffered with us. He said, you know, my body is groaning extremely as if it's going to die. It's going into death, to his disciples. So you can see here very clearly that it's, if God reverts everything and starts everything over again, it doesn't feel right about God himself.
Jairaj, just you know, you mentioned something about laws. You know, I mean, to me, when I think about a law, I think of do's and don'ts. You know, people outside might be thinking do's and don'ts, rules and regulations. But then you said that God has given us the power of choice and freedom. So where is the freedom in rules and regulations and laws?
Right. Okay. So it's a good question, because if there is, you know, where there is freedom, there is love. Okay, and love, the law is the embodiment of love. You know, for example, you know, we are saying suffering is evil. Okay, then if there is evil, there must be good. Yeah. So if there is good, then there must be a moral law. Okay, because the law tells you what's good, what's bad. Okay?
What is a moral law, Jairaj?
Okay, the moral law is God's precepts or God's set of rules.
What are they?
Like to you know, obey your parents. You should not kill. You should not steal. You should not, you know, commit adultery. Or you know, the other side of the law is how you should respond to God, how you treat him. Yeah, so those are the what, you know, Christians call as moral law. But you can see, if you assume the moral law, then there must be a moral law giver. Okay, so you can see there's a clear, if there is suffering, then there you know, if there is evil, then there's got to be good. If there's got to be good and evil, then there's got to be a law, because the law tells you what's good and evil. And if there's got to be a law, then there has got to be a lawgiver. Okay, but that is whom we are trying to disprove. We're trying to say because there is suffering, there is no God. But it doesn't work, because if there is a moral law, if there is no moral law, there is no law. There is no moral law, there's no moral lawgiver. And if there is no law, there is no good or evil. And if there's no good or evil, there's no suffering. So you can see how the moral law is intertwined with the problem of suffering so much. And this is really, really key for us to understand. And you know why? It is again going back to Lucifer in heaven, where there was Satan in heaven, where he was against the law of God. And that is why, where all these stems, you know, the suffering and all this come into that, you know, he was arguing that law was restrictive, and a free, intelligent angel or free choiced angel need not have such rules.
So Jairaj, just quickly stepping in. I mean, you know, why is keeping the law giving you freedom by keeping it? Because some people will say that you know, if Jesus has set us free, God has set us free, then why do we have to have rules and regulations? Because it's restrictive, and we're set free from that. So how does that make us free when you're asking me to keep a law, sort of thing, if you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, so keeping the law is actually freedom. Okay, but the idea generally we get is like keeping the law is restrictive. Okay, so when, for example, if you encounter an accident, that means the law has been broken. Okay, so you either go rash driving, speed driving, and what happens? There is an accident and you have broken the law. So you have actually gone under the control of the law. But when you abide by the law, or under the condemnation of the law, but when you abide by the law, you are actually free. You know, you drive carefully and you go, you are actually free. If you know exactly where I'm coming from. The freedom is in the keeping of the law. Because Lucifer felt that he is being controlled, and therefore he gave us the other thought, the other idea of that law means it's restrictive, but it's not the case. You know, a perfect creature, you know, God as a created being of God, enjoys the relationship with God when he is in correct relationship, when he's keeping the covenant relationship with God.
Okay. Just want to ask a question before I try and get some questions from the chat. Is the way things are going, there's so many disasters around the world. You know, floods, earthquakes, tornadoes, you name it, we see it. Is God angry with us and therefore causing these tragedies, calamities in the world today? Is God doing this? What do you think about that?
Okay, I think you're hinting to all the natural disaster and things that happen around us, or even sickness or whatever. But you know, we are very quick to pronounce God's judgment. You know, this as God's judgment. This is the judgment of God. I'm thinking of an example in the Bible, in Luke, where there was a tower of Siloam that fell down. You know, whether, I don't know if it's about a bad construction or whether it was earthquake, I don't know. It fell down and it killed about 18 people. I can't remember, but and these people come to Jesus and they say, you know, this tower fell. You know, was it judgment of God? And Jesus clearly tells that it was not the judgment of God. But you see, Basil, you know, these natural disasters are not straightforward. You know, some have different views about this. You know, some of the people out there, they think that this earth is vulnerable in so many different ways. This, you know, there is you know, as a globe, it has got its problems. It has developed its problems. It has aged over a period of time, and because of man's choices that he has made, he has deteriorated this world, this earth, and therefore it has caused damage to the earth that God has provided to us.
Okay.
And we have been, you know, directly or indirectly, a reason for some of these disasters. I'm not saying every disaster is because of man, but I'm saying we have been, to an extent, reason for the disaster we face. But on the positive end, you know, some of these disasters actually help, like floods, you know, help the soil to become more fertile, or the volcanic gases that erupt, you know, supply back, you know, the necessary elements that are needed for the earth. You know, so there are some positive things also in these natural disasters that happen, but we know it causes damage to life. Natural disaster is not a disaster until it causes damage to life.
Okay, one question. You've got 30 seconds, Jairaj.
Okay.
Is there a hope for us? I mean, is there a hope for us? I mean, there'll be some people thinking, worried about the future and what is happening. So is there a hope for us? Yes or no?
Okay, yes, there is hope, but the hope is not in atheism, or the hope is not in philosophy, or the hope is not in any kind of speculative religion. But the hope is in God of heaven. Okay, that's, the Christian story tells us that God does not leave people to suffer alone.
Okay.
Very clear fact is that he has sent Jesus, his son, to continue to support hurting people today. You can see medical professionals or scientists or a charity worker, anybody, they're all helping to minimize the suffering, okay, through the grace of God. So we as God's, who claim to be, God's children, we need to become more practical. We need to rebuild homes. We need to, provide for people who are sleeping hungry. We need to take care of people who are below the poverty line. We blame God for all the sufferings that we encounter, but we as people can actually overcome this suffering. If everybody thinks to share his meal with someone, this world will be a better place.
Okay, thank you very much, Jairaj. We're going to have to stop there, but you was on the hot seat this evening, and I just thank you for answering the question. So I'm going to...
Sorry, I don't think this is a very easy question to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, especially in the context of those who are going through difficulty and suffering.
True. Okay, thank you. I'm just going to pass over to Leroy now. So thank you, Leroy. Take over.
Okay, thanks, Basil, and for leading that section with those questions. And as we come to the end of our programme this evening, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. And please remember to give your feedback on tonight's programme on the Transformation website. So we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow evening at 7 for another Transformation seminar. So take care and good night. Thank you.